Guess we start with, resolution 2022-0402 would be the first one when it would come before the budget committee, and it's in reference, reducing, wheel tax by $10. Any discussion on this, or what's the pleasure of the budget committee?
Can we do this yearly?
I'm sorry,
Can we bring this up to where we do it every year? Just kind of decide whether or not we're gonna do this $10 reduction.
I'm sure anybody, you can do a resolution to do anything you want to, Bob, I mean.
If anybody goes by my house, they see how many cars I got. I wish we didn't have any taxes, but we do. But I'm also worried about the future of the revenue coming into Hawkins County. So I think if we vote on this every year, as pertaining to how our income is, it'd be a good idea. I'm all for it for right now, but I think it should be a yearly decision.
Commissioner Brew, who's sponsoring the resolution?
Yeah.
Commissioner Jesse. You got anything you wanna say, Commissioner Jesse?
Well, I ran the campaign on promises trying to reduce wheel tax. And I've had 40-some calls in the last month or so about the wheel tax. So I'm determined that I would try to submit a resolution to reduce it $10.
When did this wheel tax take effect? What month? Did it start in the middle of the year, or did it start at the beginning of the year, as of January? Who was on, we went on a commission then,
2017.
did it start in January, or did it start as soon as they passed it? Did they wait for them?
We had to wait a few months. Any resolution, according to our county attorney, that has any effect on this privilege tax or wheel tax has to pass 2 consecutive county commission meetings by 2/3 majority. So, and we also have to allow time for the state to adjust the notices that come out, also my computer software to work. So it's gonna be very, very hard to introduce this, vote on it 2 months in a row, and then put it into action the next month. So it takes us usually about 3 months to get everything going.
Those notices come out 60 to 90 days in
Yes,
advance,
they
correct?
do. Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious if, for the people up through that date, they paid the full wheel tax. Now, from the second half of the year, they get paid, they don't have to pay it, so I just.
We started it when we first instituted this newest $40. I believe it started in October, wasn't that
I
correct?
believe it was October.
Mhm.
I think it passed in May and June for its 2 meetings, and then was implemented in October.
Commissioner Taylor, goodness gracious, Commissioner. Do we need to have a motion and second to get on?
I think we do, I mean, we either need to vote to send it on, or, I know that people want to discuss it, but, if we're not gonna make a motion, I guess we don't even need to talk about it.
That's true.
So, did I hear a motion, we send it on commission, or just gonna let it sit?
I'll make a motion to send it on.
Motion by Commissioner Jesse to send it on, is there a second? I'll second it, so we vote on it or discuss it.
I recommend some second. Eric, I got some questions for you, buddy.
Please.
What is our, and I know you know the budget like the back of your hand, when we pay our bills at the end of the year, how much does it cost us to pay our bills?
It depends, but you gotta look at that in 2 different ways. It's not what our bills actually land at, but what they could land at. We've got a lot of wonderful people who watch their budgets very tightly. But when we're balancing this budget, we're looking at expenditures and revenues, we have to act as if they're going to spend their full budgets. That's what we need to be safeguarding ourselves against. They turn money in, that's wonderful. Glad they didn't spend it. Glad they didn't spend it frivolously because they didn't need to, just because they had it. But they can. Once you appropriate it to them, that's their money. And as long as they're spending on the proper lines, it can go out the window. So we need to have a budget that balances that. Sorry.
How much do we appropriate? And that's a better question.
I believe it was around 19 in the general fund, but let me double check that for you real quick. 19.6 million.
Okay, 19.6 million. If we take $10 away from the wheel tax say we did it today, how far are we gonna be short in our income for the year?
We already balanced, we'll use last year's for reference, we already balanced last year's budget $2 million in fund balance.
Okay.
This will cause us to lose about $500,000 in revenue, conservatively, probably a little bit closer to 550. So you're looking at last year, instead of taking 2 million, 2.5 million in fund balance. One of the things that I would pose to all of you is, we are about to be, hopefully today, later on in this meeting, setting our budget hearing dates. To me, this would be something that'd be much better vetted out through the budget hearing process than making a split decision on it. Let's get the budget together, see what it looks like, and see if it justifies a $500,000 reduction in revenue. If it does, so be it, but I bet you it doesn't.
So how much did, out of that 19.6 million that was appropriated, at the end of the day, when we paid our bills, in our last budget, how much, do you know how much was turned back in?
Last year, we had a positive swing, but you have to remember, you have odd one-off situations that comes up. CARES money, governor grant money. And so when you get an influx of one-time money like that, it skews our budget. So yeah, we had a positive swing. Our revenue projections, though, were very accurate. Our expenditures, they came in under, and we had some additional money come into the county. But you can't bank on one-time money to continually budget for our continuing expenditures. That's why they always talk about reoccurring revenue for reoccurring expenditures.
I'm okay with talking about decreasing our revenue. I'm okay with talking about it. But if we're going to decrease the revenue, we need to have a plan in place to recoup whatever revenue we're losing. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot continue to dip into our undesignated fund balance more and more every year until we get to a point where we're gonna have to raise taxes and it's gonna be a knee-jerk reaction like it was last time. So if we wanna have this conversation, that's great. What I don't want is to set ourselves up for a situation that we were in when the wheel tax was passed and everybody goes, oh my goodness, we're gonna have to do something drastic now. If anything, we need to protect our revenues as much as we can and try to keep from, having to increase revenue in the future, but we don't know. The fact that the county government, I believe we look at it and try to run it as a business, and I think we should. I think the taxpayers need to know that we are spending their money as wisely and prudently as we absolutely can. But part two is, the county government is also a consumer of goods. We buy paper and we buy pencils and we buy oil and we buy fuel and we buy equipment and we buy all those things, and everything is going up and up and up and up. And we are going to have to explain to our taxpayers how we plan to decrease the revenue that we're taking in and continue to offer the same amount of services that we're offering on a pre-inflation budget that we're also now going to talk about taking revenue away from. I think we're going to have to be very creative in how we provide services for our taxpayers, because it's going to be hard for us to tell them, we're going to continue to have the same amount of revenue in place, or less revenue, and continue to offer the same services. You think when our sheriff's department goes out, when our deputies go out to buy a gallon of milk, they ain't able to buy a gallon of milk for as much as they was last year. When they're having to pay whatever costs, whatever they've got going on, the income that they have is not going near as far as it has in the past. We've got to look at how to take care of our first responders. We've got to look at how to take care of every single one of our county employees that's struggling to make ends meet. They are making less today than they were before, even though their dollar amount is the same, because inflation has killed them. So before we talk about losing revenue, I would love to hear some creative ideas on how we can make up those gaps. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I'm saying.
Any other discussion? Anybody else got any questions?
A few more comments if nobody else has any other points on that. We touched on several of them here that I was already going to touch on, but I just got a few things that are confusing with the resolution in of itself. It quotes the wheel tax as $96. So the wheel tax is not $96, it's $67. Of that $67, it's actually 3 separate wheel taxes. It's been rolled out as 20, 7, and 40. So on there, it doesn't specify particularly which one we'd be cutting. The reason that's important is each wheel tax has come out here and funded the county in different manners. So if you're cutting the first 20, you're going to affect the general general fund, but you're also gonna affect highway debt service and education debt service. Neither one of those funds can afford that. If you're looking at the 7, well, it's not even sufficient to cover it, but you're gonna affect GPS and transportation. If you're looking at the last $40, you're gonna cut the general fund. It's just not there, I don't believe. You know, again, we have to come up with how we're gonna supplement that $500,000 or more of lost revenue. And again, just the timing of it. We are today, later, gonna set our budget hearings. If we wanna look at all these things and see how it's actually gonna play out, I think it'd be very wise to see, when we put pencil to paper, what this budget looks like for 22-23.
Any other discussion? If not, Sarah, do a roll call vote, please.
Ray Jesse,
Yes.
Keith Gibson,
Yes.
Charles Stafford,
Yes.
Dawson Fields, not here, Jason Roach,
Yes.
Rick Brewer,
Yes.
Bob Eads.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we have 6 yes, motion carries.
Unanimous, decision on the